quilting for a really long time, and I've found over the years that I really like to save the bits and pieces of the projects I make so that I know what worked for me and what I really love. One of the best ways to do this is to keep a journal, but I haven't been able to find a journal I really liked, so I figured out a way to make my own. Here's a journal that I'm working in currently, and as you can see, it's nice and fabric covered, and it has these ties for keeping it closed. In these journals, I like to keep ideas about color, fabrics that I really love. I also like to keep clippings from magazines of patterns that I really love or quilts that I really love to give me ideas for the future. Here's a little journal I made that's perfect for carrying around in my purse that I just made out of some cute printed fabric. Let me show you how to do it. The journals I really like for this process are called the Strathmore visual journals. The covers are really sturdy and the paper is awesome. So you can just do anything in these and they're just going to hold up great. When you want to make your journal, the first thing you want to do is measure the size of the cover that you're going to need. To do this, I measure from this edge of the journal all the way around the spiral binding to this edge. That's 19.5 inches. So for this, I'm going to add 3/4 of an inch to get that'll be the size fabric I need for one dimension. The next dimension I'm going to need is this dimension. So I measure from the top to the bottom and it's 12 inches. So I'm going to add 3/4 of an inch to that for my second dimension. The next dimension you're going to need is how big of a flap you want to keep your journal in place. I measure here at 8 inches. For this, I'm going to double up the fabric, so I'm going to turn that into 16 inches, and then I'm going to add another 3/4 of an inch for seam. And then the width of that is just going to be the same as the 12 3/4 from the other measurement. So I'm going to need 2 pieces of fabric cut at this dimension and one I'm going to need a quilted piece at that dimension. Since my journals take a lot of abuse, I like to really densely quilt the fabric. Here I've taken a couple of pieces of fabric, layered them and quilted them. They were bigger than this dimension when I started, and once it was quilted, I cut them down to that dimension. This will wrap perfectly around my journal to make a really nice cover. Now you can embellish your journal any way you want. It's a really fun, easy way to try all sorts of things. You can paint, you can use fancy quilting. It's really can be very creative. I love applique, so I've decided that I was going to do some appliques. When you're setting up an embellishment, just realize that the journal will be folded in half, and so you can just place your embellishment so that it's kind of center in your journal. Once you have that all done, you can start adding the other parts. I like to tie my journals closed with pieces of ribbon. So the first thing I'm going to do is pin a couple pieces of ribbon. Now, the fabric that I cut at this dimension, the 16 3/4 to 12 3/4, I have 2 pieces of that, and I've cut them out and I've pressed them wrong sides together so I have a nice fold, and those are going to be my flaps. So to do this, I align my raw edges with the journal cover on both sides. And then you just pin these in place to secure them while you're sewing. The next thing you're going to have to deal with is you have these raw edges here, which aren't going to work in a journal. So I've cut a couple lengths of fabric that's 2 inches wide, and I've pressed it in half, wrong sides together, so that I have something to finish that. And I just line the raw edge up with the journal cover, just like I did before, and I pin those in place. Once you have this all pinned and set up, you can take it to your sewing machine and just sew a 1/4 inch all the way around. That's all it takes, and these will all finish the raw edges. Here I have one that's all done, and I just need to trim the corners and put it on the journal. To do that, each corner I want to trim close to the corner, but not into the stitching, so that I don't have a big lump of fabric when I turn this inside out and put it on my journal. Now we're all set to turn this inside out and see how it works. I like to use a point turner. This is something from garment sewing that people use, and it's really handy when you're doing a project like this. Just reach in there . And just very carefully with your point turner, poke those corners out so you have a nice fabric cover for your journal. At this point, you can either machine stitch down these edges to cover that. You can just leave them plain if you want to. Once you have it on your journal, it's not going to matter too much, or you can just hand stitch it. As you can see, now you have a super cute little cover for your journal to make it your own. This is a great project to use all your creativity on, or to try new techniques that you haven't tried before that you want to try out.